The senator is recognized for 23 minutes.
Mr. President, there's been a lot of helium in this chamber in recent hours. I've been watching and listening and heard a lot of discussion about why we can't produce more energy. Well, in fact, we are producing more energy. I just announced about 3 weeks ago with the U.S. Geological Survey their assessment of the largest assessment of recoverable oil that they have ever announced in the lower 48. And that is called the Bakken Shale, which exists in Montana and North Dakota, and they say has up to 4+ billion barrels of oil in it. Fact is, we are producing more. My colleagues who talk about the need to produce more should understand that I and 3 others in this chamber, bipartisan by the way, helped lead the effort to open up what is called Lease 181 in the Gulf of Mexico. Substantial oil and gas reserves exist there, and we have opened a portion of that, not nearly enough, by the way. And I noticed that in the offshore proposals offered by my colleagues on the other side, they exempt the additional opening that should exist in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where there is substantial opportunity to achieve new oil and gas reserves. And in fact, the government of India, companies from India and companies from China are now exploring for oil in Cuban waters. Our companies want to do that, but American companies are not allowed to address that issue. They're not allowed to drill in waters off of Cuba because of the embargo against Cuba. So this administration has decided, well, we don't want to produce oil off of Cuba, despite the fact those waters are open. My understanding is some wells drilled by India have now struck oil. The Chinese are there, but we can't drill just miles away from Florida in Cuban waters. So next time I hear about people saying, well, people on this side of the aisle don't want to support additional production, we have supported additional production, and that's just a fact. The hood ornament on that argument from them is always about ANWR, a pristine area set aside in legislation signed by Dwight Eisenhower. Well, the fact is, ANWR should never be a first resort, perhaps a last resort at a critical time, but there is much we can and should do, and I'm going to talk about some of it this afternoon to address these issues. Yes, production, produce more. I've just described how I and others have supported more production. Conservation, we waste a prodigious amount of oil and energy in this country. We can conserve much more. Efficiency with everything we do, every switch we touch in the morning until evening, all of the appliances we use. Dramatic new efficiency is important. Renewable energy, wind energy, solar, geothermal, so many different forms of energy have to be a part, including the biofuels, have to be a part of our future. Having said all that, I want to go through a couple of charts, because what's happening today is almost unbelievable. And you know, we've got people driving to the gas pumps this afternoon. We've got people who've ordered a load of gas delivered to their farm this afternoon. We've got airlines that pull their airplane up to the gate and then have to load up with fuel. We've got truckers trying to figure out at the next truck stop, how do I stop and get a load of fuel and afford it? Look what's happened. Oil prices have doubled in a year. There is not one justification in the fundamentals of oil supply and demand for oil doubling in price in a year. There's no justification for it. In fact, this country's had an economic slowdown, and we are using slightly less energy than we did before. So demand is slightly down in this country. The inventory, the oil and gas inventories in this country since January have been up slightly, demand slightly down, product slightly up, and the price of oil doubles. There is nothing in the fundamentals that justify what has happened to the oil market. Now, Mr. President, I think I understand what's happened to this market, and here's the line that describes it. It's called speculation. We all know what speculators are. We've lived among speculators. Perhaps our neighbors speculate. We all know speculators. Will Rogers described them about 80 years ago. He said, these are people that buy what they'll never get from people who never had it and expect to make money on both sides of the trade. That's speculation. Speculators in the oil market. These aren't people that want oil. These aren't people that ever want to take delivery of oil. These aren't people that would know about the viscosity of oil or perhaps how you drill for oil, nor would they care. They are interested in trading in a commodities market for the purpose of making big profits. They're not ever wanting to take delivery of anything. They are simply speculators for the purpose of making a profit. Now, that's not why the commodities markets were established. They were established for hedging purposes, legitimate reasons to have a market. You should have and must have a market for commodities. For hedging purposes, you need some liquidity in the market. But what has happened in this market is a perversion. We have speculators in this market that have driven the price way, way up. Now, in fact, I just spent about an hour today with the head of this organization. It's called NYMEX in New York. He came down and we talked about an hour. We agree on some things, don't agree on others. This is a pit in which they trade commodities in NYMEX. Well, they trade the oil commodity. West Texas Intermediate crude is traded there, for example. And you've got people who wear these jackets and they bid and they throw, as you can see, they throw paper on the floor. And at the end of the day, people who have never touched a quart of oil, let alone a barrel of oil, have decided what the price is going to be. And it's not just on this exchange. It's on the Intercontinental Exchange in London, Dubai. It's a large market. And only part of it is regulated. And only part of it is able for us to inspect and see. Much of it's out of our view. Much of it I call dark money. It exists out there, but you can't see it. It's not transparent and it's not regulated. And it has a profound impact on the price of oil and therefore an impact on what it's going to cost to fill your car up with gas, what it's going to cost for a farmer to order a load of fuel, how many airlines are going to go bankrupt, how many truckers are going to make it through this. Now, we've had, I understand, 12 airlines in recent months declare bankruptcy. We have a lot of trucking companies, mom and pop trucking companies, who are going belly up because they can't afford to buy fuel for their trucks. The airlines are barely able to afford to buy fuel for their airplanes. Drivers pulling up to the gas pump are having a difficult time trying to figure out, how do I pay $60 or $70 for a load of gas? I pulled up behind an old car about 30 miles north of Minot, North Dakota one day, some long while ago. It was pretty much a wreck. The back bumper was hanging down about halfway. It had a lot of dents and a lot of rust. And it had an old faded sticker on the bumper. And it said, "We fought the gas war, and gas won." Probably not surprising. Gas won. Well, gas is sure winning these days. $4 a gallon, $4 plus a gallon. Oil flirting with $140 a barrel, up and down like a yo-yo.